Hello, everyone. I'm going to talk with no slides about a recent paper that I wrote with my colleague and co-worker, Dr. Asaf Maron, which is probably going to be published very, very soon. It's in the process. The title is The Human or Machine Issue, Turing-Inspired Reflections on an Everyday Matter. As I think everyone knows, Alan Turing in his 1950 famous paper introduced the imitation game, which has been called the Turing test, as part of his proposed definition of the notion of machine intelligence. And his test is a means to determine whether a computer can be labeled intelligent. Of course, over the years, the Turing test has been the subject of much work, controversies, various variants of the test, and a lot of discussion. Here in this paper and in this short lecture, we will completely sidestep the conceptual philosophical issue of defining or measuring intelligence, as well as the practical question of whether a machine can be built to replace or mimic a person in the performance of even a specific task. Instead, we look more broadly at a concept that we term the human or machine issue, the H or M issue. In a future world, when in some interactions machines will be able to mimic humans impressively, new social, psychological, functional, and obviously technical issues are bound to become relevant. So here are some of the questions that come to mind immediately, and in this paper, we actually discuss them. For example, will humans care about whether the agent they are interacting with is a human or a machine? And if yes, then why would they care? How will a person's behavior or emotional state differ between interactions with another human and interactions with a machine whose behavior is perhaps indistinguishable from a human's? How will the answer to the question of an agent's human or machine identity, the H or M question, be elicited? Will the language a human uses and the social practices we all apply change in such cases? In other words, will we speak differently when we know that the agent we are discussing or interacting with is a human versus whether it's a machine? Will our behavior be very different? Will the machine-machine interactions change when the behavior of one of these, or both maybe, is very close to that of a human, even when machines talk to each other? Will machines indeed be indistinguishable from humans, or will this become eventually a non-issue because openly taking the advantage of a machine's capabilities will be prioritized, will take priority over manifesting human-like behavior? And in the paper, we examine these issues, these questions, and we discuss research, opinions, and predictions about differences between humans and machines, and differences between human-human interactions and human-machine interactions. And of course, what we have in mind is obviously talking on the telephone to someone on the other end. That someone might be a human, it might be a bot, but even going so far as to think about the issue of driving on a road or a street or a highway, and there is a car next to you or in front of you or behind you, and you don't really know whether this car is driven by a human being or whether it's an autonomous car, in which case the same kinds of issues arise. Maybe language not so much, because you will not be talking to the other car, but perhaps even that. And we think that of special interest in the future of technology and human endeavors is the importance of this human or machine question, which stands for the interest or curiosity of a person who is engaged in an everyday interaction with an agent and is wondering perhaps whether that agent is a human or a machine. Now, let me get back to the Turing test for a moment. If one insists, one can view the original Turing test and its many variants where you have machine in one room, a human in another room, and a human interrogator trying to tell which room has the computer and which room has the human, that original imitation game or Turing test can be viewed as a special case of dealing with the H or M question that we are discussing here, where in a controlled laboratory setting, the human acts as an interrogator in attempting to reveal the human or machine identity of an unidentified and, for that matter, hidden agent, based on observing the agent's reactions to what the interrogator serves them. Specifically, I would like to emphasize some of the differences between the discussion that we have in this paper about the H or M issue, the human or machine issue, the human or machine question, from the original Turing test. So just to emphasize, here we concentrate on everyday interactions rather than on a controlled lab setting. In our setting, the interrogation cannot stray from the intended subject matter of the human-agent interaction. So when you're talking to your medical services provider on the telephone, the idea is not that you're going to ask questions about JF Kennedy or about the war between Russia and Ukraine in order to figure out whether that's about, but you want to figure out during the interaction, maybe after the interaction, whether who you are or were talking to was a machine or a human being. Whereas in the Turing test, the interrogator is free to guide the conversation as he or she sees fit. By the way, both in Turing's paper and in our article, we are not proposing a particular protocol for trying to answer that question. What we focus on here, as opposed to the Turing test, is the agent's H or M identity and how it affects the present interaction and possibly future ones too, rather than on whether the answer can or cannot be discovered. So here, whether one can conclude that in general machines can mimic humans well is not an issue, or maybe a particular machine can be labeled intelligent is not an issue. These are things that worried and concerned Turing in his paper, but we are not talking about them. Our main interest is learning about human behavior, not assessing machine capabilities. We are interested here in patterns of such effects across many interactions between humans and agents, and not necessarily on a particular set of techniques. And so eventually, when this paper appears, which I hope will be very soon, you will be able to find out more about how we discuss these questions and how we raise them and in what context. But each of these questions has many variable issues. For example, one thing that I hear people say very often is that the first law of interacting with a machine or with artificial intelligence in general is that the artificial intelligent agent, namely the machine, should say upfront, notify you, I am a machine. And this sounds as though it makes a lot of sense, but in the paper we provide one or two cases where you actually do not want the answer to the H or M question to be revealed to the human being on the other side of the interaction. So what we're saying is that recent technological advances give intelligent machines critical roles in our everyday lives. We do not know, of course, if such machines will come to be treated as conventional objects like personal computers today, ATMs, smartphones, or as different kinds of living species, perhaps. That's kind of far-fetched, but people are talking about that too. In the long run, and in particular cases, they may even become indistinguishable from human professionals. But however that issue or those philosophical ruminations might turn out, we, Asaf Moran and I, are convinced that determining whether one is interacting with a machine or with another human is likely to become a central question, both from the technological point of view, from the philosophical point of view, from the ethical point of view, and from many other aspects. And the insights that are likely to be gained from studying the question and responding to or taking the questions that we ask in our paper and the ideas that we put forth in this paper seriously and making efforts to think about them more deeply and perhaps respond to some of them technically, mathematically, algorithmically, we think that this question and its ramifications might be poised to have a significant impact on the way we interact with each other, with machines, machines between themselves, and in a wide variety of areas, including day-to-day interactions, including technical software engineering practices, human-computer interaction practices, autonomous vehicles, and many other areas and fields which would take a long time to list. So the bottom line is a paper in the making, hopefully to be published very soon, in which we address not technically, not rigorously or scientifically, but by thinking and bringing up issues, what we think is a very, very important question for the future of the human species and human interaction and human behavior, which is the issue of whether we are interacting with a human or a machine, and how that might affect the way we interact, the way the machine interacts, and so forth. So thank you all very much, and I'm hoping for a good future for us all.